dreams are the strangest thing ever. We know nothing about them, why they happen, what they mean, and yet a majority of people have experienced them in their lifetime. Recurring dreams are also vastly different from person to person. Some may have a funny dream that when they awaken, they begin laughing just remembering it. Another person may have a weird dream that when they awaken, causes them to question themselves. How the hell did my brain come up with that? Finally, some people may experience a sad dream, maybe reliving their last moments with a deceased loved one. Unfortunately, I don't fall into any of these categories. Instead of getting recurring dreams, I sadly get recurring nightmares. I wish I had funny dreams or weird dreams. Hell, I'd even take sad dreams. But I seem to be stuck with creepy, scary nightmares instead. I started to get this recurring nightmare about a year ago, and it has continued every night since. It started out simple enough. I would find myself in a long, dark hallway. The only light I could see would be at the far end of the hallway. The light came from 2 torches on either side of a heavy-looking wood door. In this dream, I would walk down the hallway until I would reach the door. The dream would end when my hand would reach up and go to push open the door. I never got to see what was on the other side of the door. Until 2 weeks ago, that is. 2 weeks ago, I fell asleep and found myself in that oh-so-familiar hallway. Only this time I noticed 2 things were different about the dream. The first, as I looked down the hallway towards the door, where once was only 2 torches and the door. Now that scene also contained a plaque on the wall next to the door. Just underneath one of the torches. I couldn't see what was on it, but I saw that the middle of the plaque was an insanely dark black color. It was so dark that it seemed to suck all the light from the torch into it. The second thing I noticed was how I was feeling. Where once I felt boredom and a little annoyance at having the same boring dream over and over again. Now I feel fear, not just a small jolt like when there's a jump scare in a movie, but a deep, primal fear. Like there was a predator stalking me and I needed to run away as fast as I could. I needed to do something fast or else something terrible would happen to me. This feeling made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and it terrified me. Like the dream normally did, I felt myself beginning to walk forwards towards the door. With each step, the fear and dread seemed to deepen, and even make me feel sick to my stomach. I tried to fight it, but it felt as if something else was forcing me to walk forward. Each step felt like I was walking closer and closer to my death or something. I don't know what's worse than death, but I was terrified to find out. When I reached the door, the dread I felt was overwhelming. The pit in my stomach made me sick. I was positive I was going to throw up, but I somehow managed to keep it down. As I looked at the door, I noticed it had changed this time too. Where used to be a heavy wooden door, now stood a door made of pitch black metal. It sucked in the light and gave off almost an aura. The door now seemed evil. This was not the only thing to change about the door. What once was a plain door now had intricate carvings on it. The carvings depicted people committing different acts. One carving showed people gorging themselves on food and drinks. They were depicted as inhumanly large, and they seemed to even fight over every little morsel of food. Another depicted people committing acts of extreme violence towards others. It showed war and torture. It showed people being basically consumed by anger and hate, essentially becoming animals and trying to inflict as much harm as they could. A third carving showed people committing different sexual acts. from simple acts to the most heinous you could think of. It showed everything from simple acts of lovemaking to terrible acts like necrophilia. They were all displayed on this carving. The fourth showed me jealousy and bitterness. A man hated another because a man liked the other's wife. Another watched what seemed to be their ex-partner laugh with someone else, a look of anger and jealousy on their face. The fifth showed me people hoarding money. They betrayed others and did everything they could to gain more. They never helped others, only themselves. They needed the money. The sixth carving was a second from the top of the door. This one just depicted people looking down. It seemed as if they were observing all the other atrocities being committed on the door. The only expression they had was a look of boredom or empathy as they watched what all others did. The last carving was at the top of the door, and unlike the others, it was oddly beautiful. It depicted a beautiful city in the clouds. The architecture seemed to be pieces picked from different time periods. I saw a villa created in a classic, ancient Roman architecture. I saw a cathedral that almost seemed to be an exact copy of the Cologne Cathedral. I even saw modern-day skyscrapers. Even with all the mix and match architecture, the city seemed to flow and was stunning. Standing in the front of the city was a man. He was dressed in clothes fit for a king, silk robes, golden jewelry. Hell, he even had a crown. He, like the last panel, was looking down, almost watching the atrocities the other carvings were committing. Unlike the last panel, he was not bored or empathetic. He had a calm, sincere smile, almost as if he was enjoying what was happening. The oddest thing about this man was not the smile or the clothes. He had a set of massive black wings coming out of his back. They, like the door in the plaque, seems to suck in all light that happens to hit them. The new design of the door filled me with anxiety and dread. Why, after so long, is it changing now? After observing the door, I felt a force seemingly turn my head, forcing me to look at the plaque now. It was simple, pitch black metal, with no designs on it. In place of designs, there was writing. Lasciaran speranza, voi ciclet. I did not recognize what language it was written in, but all I know is that, as soon as I saw it, it had a huge effect on me. It seemed as if all hope I had of waking up and getting out of this dream just left. It was as if all my hope abandoned me, and I was now stuck in this reality. I felt tears run down my cheeks as I felt myself suddenly start moving again. I felt my head turn back towards the door and watched as my hand slowly raised and reached for the door. I tried to force myself to stop, but it was as if something was in control of my body, not myself anymore. I looked around, trying to find something, anything that could help. I felt myself touch the door and searched even more frantically. As I felt myself slowly opening the door, I looked up, and just for a second, I saw something. At the top of the door, the carving of the man who was in front of the city and looking down was now looking directly at me. He still had a smile, but now it was more sinister, evil. It was even demonic. The door opened, and instead of waking up like I normally did, and like I was wishing would happen, I found myself in a new room. It was dark. I could only make out the stone floor and some candles in what I assumed was a center. There were 3 candles arranged in a big triangle on the floor, but their dim light did not reveal what was in the room with me. As I felt myself walk forward, I felt like I was being watched. There was something in the shadows staring at me, observing me, like they were a predator and I was a prey. I slowly felt myself move until I was in the center of those candles. I tried moving, but I was still frozen. "Well, I was wondering when you would finally visit me." A voice called out from the shadows. The voice I heard, I can only describe as perfect. It was deep, but not too deep. Masculine, but not too masculine. It had a slight accent, but I couldn't place it. Maybe slightly Middle Eastern. The only way to describe this voice is to imagine the perfect male voice, and that's what it was. "I kept inviting you, but then you would leave immediately. That really hurt my feelings," the voice said with a hint of amusement and fake hurt. "I'm glad you accepted my invitation finally." The voice seemed to be coming from everywhere. It was on my right, then left, then right in front of me. But the scariest was when it came from right behind me. It was so close, I could feel his breath in my ear, his hand on my shoulder. All I could do was look forward and pray that I would wake up soon. "Oh, I'm sorry, but that won't work down here," the voice said in a mocking way. "But I will reveal myself so we can talk business." The voice came from right in front of me. As if materializing from the darkness, he appeared. The only way to describe him, just like his voice, is perfection. He had long gold hair, as if light itself had become hair and rested itself on his head. He was tall, around 6.5 feet tall. He was in perfect shape, broad shoulders, muscular arms. He was as if perfection came to life. He was dressed in white robes that seemed to be made of silk or some other lavish material. The most striking thing about him were his eyes. They were golden in color, almost the same color as the sun, but they did not give off the same warmth as the sun. They seemed to stare right through me, as if he was looking directly at my soul, evaluating it, judging if it was worthy or not. It terrified me. As I observed him, I realized he looked eerily similar to the man in the carving. He did not have a crown or wings, but other than that, they were basically twins. He smirked at me, as if reading my mind. "And then another life, maybe," he said, like he was trying to make a joke. But I heard bitterness and anger behind his words. "Anyways, I need you for something," he said, looking at me in excitement. "All I need you to do is sign this contract." Out of nowhere, he pulled out a scroll, and it looked old, ancient almost. As soon as I saw it, the dread I felt turned to terror. I don't know what that contract was. All I knew was that I needed to get away from it immediately. He held up the contract, and I felt my hand slowly being forced to raise towards it. When he saw that, his smile grew. It was more than what was humanly possible. It became more sinister. It seemed to force more of his face into the shadows, giving a more evil look. His eyes seemed to flicker from gold to deep pitch black. I tried to force any part of my body away. I couldn't control myself. I started to cry even harder. I couldn't touch that contract. I tried to pray. I apologized for everything I did in life. I promised that I would become a better person if I got out of there. As I prayed, the man's smile started to drop. He started to look more and more annoyed. As I continued to pray, I started to feel the control return to me. My hand started moving away from the contract. The man's smile was now replaced with a snarl. He started to growl like an animal. "No, this one is mine," he growled out, his eyes now pitch black. He started to move closer to me. I kept moving my arm back, but he seemed to move faster and faster. Right as he was about to force the contract to my hand, there was an incredibly bright flash of light. I felt warmth, peace, and safety all around me as the light flashed even brighter. I heard the man give an inhuman scream before I suddenly jerked awake in my bed. I was sweating profusely. I was shaking. My breath was ragged, as if I just all-out sprinted a marathon. I jerked around, looking for the man, but as realization settled in that I was back in my room, I started bawling. I let out cries of terror and agony as a dream settled in, and I realized I was actually safe at home. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't have that recurring dream. The first couple of nights, I was afraid to fall asleep. I would stay up until I basically passed out from exhaustion. When I realized I wasn't having that recurring dream anymore, I was ecstatic. For the first time in over a year, I dreamt normal dreams. I dreamt of my family, my mother and father. Even my grandparents were there. It was a nice dream about them because they had passed away a while ago. They always seemed to try and tell me something. But when I woke up, I could never remember what they said. It's exciting to have normal dream problems, like not remembering them again. Last night, I dreamed of a trip my parents, grandparents, and I took to the beach when I was a kid. I remember that trip being really hectic. I even dreamt about my grandparents yelling for me when I was in the water. They seemed frantic, trying to tell me something, but like the last couple of times, when I woke up, I either couldn't hear or just couldn't remember what they said. Tonight I lay down for bed, ready to dream about all the good times I had with my family again. I laid my head down, closed my eyes, and with a smile, I drifted off to sleep. When I opened my eyes, I was in a familiar hallway again. As soon as I saw the dark door, I felt terror. Tears filled my eyes. I felt myself being forced down the hallway. All I could do was scream and cry in my head. I didn't want to be here. I wanted my family. Please, God, don't let the man be here. As I got closer to the door, my tears fell quicker, and I felt sick. I thought I was going to throw up, but I couldn't. My body was basically shut down as the outside force controlled me like a puppet on some strings. I saw the carvings on the door, the many people committing atrocities, seemingly mocking me. I saw my arm raise up and open the door. My heart stopped as I saw the man immediately once the door was open. He was standing by the candles with a disarming smile on his face as I was forced to walk to the center once again. His eyes were once again a golden color, but once again they were filled with evil intention. "Well, that was a rude exit, wasn't it?" he asked me, the smile on his face dropping slightly before it grew once again. "Hopefully this time we won't have any interruptions." He held the scroll up once again. My arm being forcibly raised as well. I fought it as hard as I could. I could feel my muscles strain from how much I was fighting. It didn't help. My arm was still reaching for the scroll. I prayed again, asked for help. I didn't want to be there. I was scared. I wanted to wake up. The man started growling again. He was getting angry. Right as I was about to touch the scroll, there was another flash of bright light. I was ecstatic. I cried tears of joy. I was safe. The man growled deeply. It looked like he was being pushed back. No, I refuse to let you take him again, he yelled out, his voice deepening, becoming almost demonic sounding. I closed my eyes as the light became even stronger. I felt the peace and safety, and I smiled. Before I could let out a breath, I felt a hand wrap around my wrist. I opened my eyes and saw in terror as a man grabbed me through the light. His skin was sizzling, burning as he held me and wouldn't let me go. You are not getting away, he growled, his voice becoming even deeper. A dark shadow seemed to come out of his hand and seemed to try and push my arm up. It seemed to fight against the light I was standing in. I closed my eyes and prayed even more. It was all I felt I could do. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel the light was getting brighter and brighter. I heard the man scream in agony. It sounded like a wild animal before I felt his grip slacken on my wrist. I felt the control return to my body as I ripped my wrist out of his grip. He screamed before the light brightened to an unimaginable level, and then everything went silent. When it faded, I opened my eyes and saw I was in my room once again. I cried tears of joy. I thanked God, Jesus, and every holy figure I could think of for getting me out of that dream. I closed my eyes and tried to get my breathing back under control. I told you, you were mine. I heard that deep voice ring out. I shot up in my bed, frantically looking around. There at the foot of my bed stood the man. He had a huge grin on his face, his eyes pitch black. When he saw me looking at him, with fear in my eyes, he licked his lips. I told you that you would sign the contract. He was smiling as he held up the scroll. At the very bottom of the scroll was a tiny dot of red liquid that wasn't there before. I felt tears roll down my cheeks as I looked down at my wrist. There were 3 small scratch marks from when I ripped my arm free. Only one of them was deep enough to draw blood. I looked back up at the man. He now stood with a crown made of darkness on his head, and 2 pitch black wings spread out behind him. Now, let's get to work, he said with a smile, waving his hand around him. I looked around me and saw I was not in my room anymore. I was in a dark room, surrounded by 3 candles. I felt myself starting to collapse before a force took control of me and forced me to stand straight. I felt the force control my head to look up. I watched as a man slowly turned around and walked into the shadows. He is ours now, the man whispered as he disappeared from sight. As soon as he was lost from my vision, I saw dots appear in the darkness. Some were a blood red. Others were a sickly green. Some were a dark orange. Others were a sickly yellow. Some were an enchanting dark blue color, and a couple were a soft light blue. The last dots that appeared were a deep, rich royal purple. As I looked at all the dots, I came to a terrifying realization. They were eyes, and they were all staring at me.